Now my admiration for him is even higher because of his humility. I would presume, I don't have any insider information, but I would presume that his esteem for the office as the successor of St. Peter and the chief pastor of the Church Universal, that esteem is so high that in all humility he simply said, I can't do it anymore.
Cardinal Archbishop Timothy Dolan of New York reacting to the surprise announcement this morning that Pope Benedict XVI is resigning. It's right, if you haven't heard the news yet, if you've been living under a rock all day, Pope Benedict becomes the first pope in 600 years to step down. He says, after having repeatedly examined my conscience before God, I have come to the certainty that my strengths, due to an advanced age, are no longer suited to an adequate exercise of the Petrine ministry. Translation, he's too old to be pope, he's too frail to be pope, he is stepping down. Michael Coren, the bishop, joins us now to talk more about this. And Michael, you know a thing or two about Catholicism. Viewers know that both of you and I are Mass-attending Catholics. This is a big deal in many ways because any change in whoever sits in the chair of St. Peter is a big deal, but stepping down, it's never happened in my lifetime. It hasn't happened in near 600 years. No, I mean, 14, 15, there have only been about 4 or 5 popes who have ever actually resigned the office. I mean, remember, just the way we have progressed as a species, people live to a much older age now. People died younger in the past. The early popes were frequently martyred, and that may well happen in the future, who knows. But he is a man of enormous humility. He wanted to resign even when he was a cardinal. He's an intellectual at heart. He wanted to simply study and write and pray. And this time, I think he realizes he has a heart condition, had a stroke. I don't know if there's any form of early dementia. I have no idea, but it's not beyond the realms of possibility. Pope John Paul, of course, was a man who, he was shot, for goodness sake. There was disability. He was terribly ill. He embraced this, gave it up to God, and tried to make this an icon of how disability and antiquity were not barriers to greatness, the sanctity of life. But in this case, we have a remarkable, wonderful man, I believe, and a great pope who has said it's time to move on. And I'm sure that is the right decision. All right, let's look at some of the people that can replace him, because we're already seeing short lists and long lists of people that could come in. But the interesting part to me is the man on the far side of the TV there, Cardinal Marc Ouellet of Canada. Yeah. 68 years old, he's from the Ontario-Quebec border, speaks several languages, and I've met him a couple of times. He's a quiet man, but a knowledgeable one, and you do get something exuding out of him that I don't know quite how to put into words. Well, it's unlikely to be an American, which is why Cardinal Dolan, and it would be marvelous to have an Irish Pope, even though vicariously, and he hasn't been Irish for quite a long time, from an Irish family, but I don't think that would happen. But if they want to include the Americas, it will be Latin America or Canada. Here is a man who is very close to the Pope, very close to the College of Cardinals, has been in charge of appointments for some time. He once said in an interview, being Pope will be a nightmare. And for those people who are cynical and think, oh, they will say that, but they want to be Pope, these are men of great ability who in any walk of life would have done very well and could have been multimillionaires and leading politicians. They wanted this life, very challenging and sacrificial life. So I don't think he wants it. Of course, he would take it. That would be his role, his duty. But I don't think would actively want it. It could be. It could be. Then for the first time in human history, even the CBC would have to give the Catholic Church something positive, because there'd be a Canadian Pope, and that would be a first, wouldn't it? Well, I mean, right now, all the media outlets are giving at least some positive treatment to the Pope, although CNN immediately came out with Catholics United, which is a left-wing lobby group that actively campaigns against the church, to say, well, look, we've got to give up on these moral issues the church cares about and talk about the moral issues that the people care about, and then proceeded to list off the Democratic Party's platform. Right, it would be rather like a major issue in the Jewish community, the Jewish culture, and to speak for Jews, they had someone on who was from a Jewish anti-Zionist organization, representing maybe 7 people. This is, I've been doing some stuff for Global too, and I think it's rather wonderful that other networks use Sun News, Sun TV hosts to give them opinions. A few moments after I was on, there was a panel there talking about, well, no one goes to church anymore. No, hundreds of millions of people go to church. You don't go to church anymore. You see, And more people go to church on Sunday in Canada than watch NHL hockey, either in the arenas or on television.
Of course.
That is a fact that most people want. Look, before we run out of time, let's look at some of the others and talk about them. You mentioned Cardinal Dolan. Yeah. You don't think that he's a possibility.
He's a wonderful man, but I think an American Pope would be different. I'm not sure.
Cardinal Sandri from Argentina. I'm sure you know him well. I've had him over for dinner. What can you tell us about him?
A very able man, and probably will be more on moral issues and orthodoxy, very much as Pope Benedict. Probably had a slightly different attitude towards. He's had to deal with liberation theology in Latin America, so more of an outreach in a way to the underclass and to the poor without embracing liberation theology. I still think there's a very good chance that we will have a black African pope. We've never had a black pope. Maybe in the 2nd century, we're not sure. We had North African popes, weren't quite sure of their colour, but the cardinal from Ghana is a wonderful man. He's 64. He's very outspoken about Islam, very good on issues, moral issues and contraception. And I would just love to see a very wealthy, silly, white liberal telling a black pope that he doesn't understand reality.
I want to ask you quickly about this. The idea, and we keep hearing this, that well, maybe there'll be a more progressive pope. There might be a more liberal pope. And this happened the last time. And I remember sitting up in the hot room, this room full of journalists on Parliament Hill, watching the conclave go on. And journalists in there expressing their desire for a more liberal pope. Just, you know, this John Paul II, oh, so tough on things like contraception. We'll get a more liberal pope. The definition of liberal and conservative within a Catholic Church setting is vastly different than liberal and conservative in a political setting. You can't just say if we get a more liberal pope that the church is going to suddenly become the United Church of Canada.
Yeah, and also it's a misunderstanding of what progressive means. The Roman Catholic Church wants third world debt to be forgiven. It wants a massive redistribution of wealth from the wealthy world to the poor world. It wants an outreach to the poor. It's radical in its policies. What this is about is a bunch of journalists who say, I want to marry my gay lover and I want to abort my child and I want to use condoms. That is not an indication of progress. That is your self-indulgence, helping the disabled, the poor, the black, the brown, making sure that women are allowed to be born, making sure that Muslims don't slaughter Christians in their villages, making sure we deal with hunger. These are issues that matter, my friend, not whether you can go to a cocktail party and say, look at me, I'm in a gay marriage and my sister's just aborted her baby. That's not progress.
All right, Michael, you try not to mince words next time you come on. Tell us how you really feel. Facebook.com, share your thoughts there. It's easy to find us. Just punch in my name or punch in Byline. You'll find us, and make sure you click the like button. Stick around. We've got more to come.